All right, let's jump right into this. On August 15th, 2025, you had a huge, high stakes meeting between then US President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The setting? Anchorage, Alaska. Now, it was a meeting that had all the makings of a historic event. But the big question is, what did it actually accomplish?
I mean, talk about setting the stage. They rolled out the red carpets, had B-2 bombers doing flyovers, the whole 9 yards. This was a really big deal because it was the first time in ages that Putin got such a warm welcome in a Western country. It definitely looked like a major shift was happening.
But that's the real question we're digging into in this explainer. You know, once you look past all the pomp and circumstance, was this a genuine diplomatic breakthrough that could actually lead to peace? Or was it all just an elaborate show for the cameras? Okay, so to figure that out, we've got to first break down the context here. Let's set the stage and look at how this whole controversial meeting came to be in the first place.
So let's get the basic facts down. The two leaders met up in Anchorage, and they were in secret talks for hours. But here's the kicker. When it was all said and done, there was no official deal. Nothing concrete was announced.
And you know, President Trump's own words kind of sealed it. His comment that no deal until there's a deal really drove home the point that despite the massive spectacle, nothing was actually signed on the dotted line. It left a lot of people scratching their heads wondering what the whole point was. All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we need to look at the evidence. The source material we're drawing from points to 7 key takeaways that came out of this summit. These are going to help us answer our big question. And these takeaways cover the whole spectrum, from the fact there was no deal to a really sudden change in focus and all the way to what it meant for sanctions and the war on the ground. Now, this second takeaway is a huge one. There was this really intense pivot. Before the meeting, the American goal was pretty clear: get an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. But suddenly, during the talks, President Trump started pushing for this vague, broad, grand peace deal, which, surprise, surprise, sounded a lot more like what Russia wanted to talk about. And this leads us right to our third point. For Vladimir Putin, this summit was, without a doubt, a huge strategic win. Why? Because he got to stand on the world stage, treated as a respected leader, without having to give up anything beforehand. Just that appearance of legitimacy was a massive victory for his government. And you can see this in the kind of statements that were made. At one point, when talking about Ukraine, Trump said they should make a deal because, and I'm quoting here, Russia is a very big power and they are not. A statement like that just completely undercuts Ukraine's position. So let's talk about what happened after the summit. Or maybe what didn't happen. This is so important. Takeaways 5 and 6 show that no new sanctions were put on Russia. The ones already in place, they weren't even being strictly enforced. And the result? The war in Ukraine just kept going, completely uninterrupted. Okay, so we've got all the evidence laid out. Let's circle back to our big question and really analyze the impact. Was this Alaska summit a win for diplomacy, or was it just a show? The source material actually uses a fantastic word for this, a showmance. It's when you have an event that looks like a serious diplomatic meeting, but it's really mostly for show. And in a showmance, one side walks away with all the real strategic wins. This scorecard here lays it all out pretty clearly. Just look at the 2 columns. For Russia, the gains were huge. International legitimacy, no new sanctions, shifting the whole story to their grand deal idea, and buying more time for their military. And for the West and Ukraine, well, that side is all concerns. Worries about losing focus on a ceasefire, Russia digging in, and a weaker Western alliance. So, the final verdict from the source is pretty direct. The Alaska summit was a strategic victory for Putin. It created this illusion of a big peace process, but in reality, it risked making the conflict drag on even longer, all under this false hope of a deal. But the story doesn't quite end there. This whole episode leaves us with one final, really important question that kind of just hangs in the air. So, what are we supposed to make of this? Was that whole vision of a grand peace deal nothing more than a PR stunt, a fantasy to distract from what was really happening? Or, and this is the tricky part, is it possible that somewhere in all that spectacle, A foundation was laid that could, someday, actually become the basis for a real solution. That's the question the Alaska summit leaves us with.